The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Dr. Kim Tae-ho adjusted his tie for the 5th time. He had been preparing for this moment for 3 years, ever since the alien ships first appeared in Earth orbit. The Galactic Council had finally agreed to meet with human representatives, and somehow Tae-ho had been chosen to lead the delegation. His hands shook slightly as he reviewed his notes one last time. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Council and claimed to represent over 200 different species from across the galaxy. They had been watching Earth for decades, and now they wanted to officially welcome humanity into their cosmic community. The conference room had been specially built for this meeting. Everything was sterile and white with translation equipment covering every surface. The aliens had insisted on meeting in person rather than through video calls. They said it was important for proper diplomatic protocol. At exactly 9 in the morning, the alien delegation arrived. Their ship landed silently in the courtyard and 5 figures emerged. The lead alien was tall and graceful with blue skin and 4 arms. Ambassador Veltar was his name, according to the briefing files. He wore elaborate robes, covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and change in the light behind him. Walked 4 other aliens, each from different species. One looked like a giant insect with crystalline wings, another resembled a walking tree with bark-like skin. The third was short and stocky with gray skin and large black eyes. The 4th alien was the strangest of all, seeming to be made of living metal that flowed like liquid. Tae-ho stood as they entered the room. His small team of scientists and diplomats rose with him. Park Sojin, the linguistics expert, looked nervous but excited. Lee Dongwoo, the cultural anthropologist, was scribbling notes already. Captain Choi Minho stood at attention representing the military while Dr. Yoon Ji-hai checked her recording equipment one last time. Ambassador Veltar stepped forward and spoke in perfect English, though his voice had a musical quality that made it sound almost like singing. We welcome you to our galaxy, humans of Earth. We hope this marks the beginning of a long and prosperous relationship between your species and the Galactic Council. Tae-ho had practiced his response many times, but now his mind went blank for a moment. He cleared his throat and tried to project confidence. Thank you, Ambassador Veltar. We are honored by your visit and excited to learn about the galaxy beyond our solar systems. He spoke. Tae-ho noticed something strange. There seemed to be a 6th figure in the alien delegation standing directly behind Ambassador Veltar. It was tall and thin, almost like a shadow, but with more substance. The figure wore flowing robes that seemed to be made of darkness itself, and its face was hidden beneath a deep hood. What was odd was that none of the other aliens seemed to notice this figure. It stood perfectly still, except for occasional nods when Veltar spoke. The shadow figure seemed to be listening intently to every word. Tae-ho tried to focus on the ambassador but kept glancing at the mysterious figure behind him. The being was at least 8 feet tall and had a presence that made the air feel thick and heavy. It reminded Tae-ho of the old temples back in Korea where his grandmother used to pray. There was something ancient and powerful about this shadow being. Ambassador Veltar continued speaking about trade agreements and cultural exchange programs, but Tae-ho found it hard to concentrate. The shadow figure had turned its hidden face toward the human delegation, and though Tae-ho could not see its eyes, he felt like he was being studied very carefully. The other aliens in the delegation seemed completely unaware of their tall companion. The insect-like being was taking notes on a device that looked like flowing water. The tree alien swayed slightly as if moved by an invisible breeze. The gray-skinned alien kept its large, black eyes fixed on the humans while the metal being shifted and flowed in what might have been curiosity. After 10 minutes of formal speeches, Tae-ho could not contain his curiosity any longer. He had been trained to be observant and ask questions when something seemed unusual. During a pause in the conversation, he decided to speak up. Thank you for your warm welcome, Ambassador Veltar. Though I have to ask, is the tall shadow figure behind you part of your official delegation? He seems quite interested in our conversation, and I want to make sure we address everyone properly. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Every alien in the room froze completely. Ambassador Veltar's blue skin turned pale gray and his forearms began to tremble. The insect being dropped its note-taking device with a sound like breaking glass. The tree alien stopped swaying and its bark-like skin darkened to almost black. The gray alien eyes went wide with what looked like pure terror, and the metal being solidified into a statue-like form. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Tae-ho looked around the room, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. His human colleagues were equally puzzled. Park Sojin leaned forward with concern while Captain Choi stepped closer as if sensing danger. Ambassador Veltar's voice when he finally spoke was barely a whisper and shook with emotion. What did you just say? Tae-ho felt like he had somehow made a terrible mistake, but he did not understand what he had done wrong. He gestured toward the shadow figure which still stood motionless behind the ambassador. The tall being standing behind your chair, about 8 feet tall, very thin, wearing what looks like flowing dark robes. He has been nodding along with everything you have said and seems very interested in our meeting. The insect alien made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The tree-being branches began to shake as if in a hurricane. The gray alien started making rapid, clicking sounds while the metal being began to flow and shift in agitated patterns. Ambassador Velta took several steps backward, his forearms raised, as if to protect himself. His voice was filled with awe and terror when he spoke again. "You can see the Guardian. You can actually see our sacred protector." Toho looked back at the shadow figure which had now turned to face him directly. Though he still could not see its face under the hood, he sensed something like approval or perhaps amusement. The being raised one long arm in what might have been a greeting. The human scientist felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. Whatever he had just revealed, it was clearly something extraordinary and possibly dangerous. The aliens were looking at him now, not with curiosity or diplomatic interest, but with a mixture of fear and wonder that made his skin crawl. He realized that this first contact meeting had just taken a turn that no one had prepared for. The tall shadow figure, the Guardian as they called it, was apparently invisible to the aliens themselves, but perfectly visible to human eyes. The implications of this discovery would change everything. The alien mothership hung in space like a massive metal city with lights flickering across its surface like stars. Park Sojin stared out the window of the shuttle as they approached the docking bay. She had been working as a translator for the past week since the shocking first contact meeting, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Ambassador Veltar had requested that she come aboard the main ship to help with what he called urgent translation work. The other alien species wanted to test something, and they needed a human who could work with languages. Sojin had studied 17 different Earth languages and had a gift for understanding new ones quickly. The docking bay was enormous, with ships from dozens of different worlds. Park Sojin saw vessels that looked like living creatures, others that appeared to be made of pure crystal, and some that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. Aliens of every imaginable shape and size moved through the area going about their daily business. Captain Gorvik of the Morgoth fleet met her at the airlock. He was intimidating, with red scaly skin and flames that flickered around his head like a crown. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together when he spoke. "Human translator, we need your help with something very important. Many species want to know if you can see what we cannot." Sojin nodded, though she was not entirely sure what he meant. The past week had been confusing, with aliens asking strange questions about shadows and invisible beings. She followed Captain Gorvik through corridors filled with artwork from across the galaxy. They entered a vast chamber where representatives from at least 30 different species waited. Some floated in the air, others stood on multiple legs, and a few seemed to exist as pure energy contained in special suits. The air hummed with tension and excitement. At the center of the room stood a Zolonian female with skin like polished silver and eyes that changed color constantly. Her name was High Priestess Zelamar, and she was apparently one of the most important religious leaders in the galaxy. "Human Sojin," she said in a voice like crystal bells, "we have gathered here to ask you about our most sacred beliefs. For thousands of years our people have worshipped beings we call guardians. They guide us, protect us, and watch over our worlds, but we have never been able to see them directly." The Zolonian gestured around the room. Sojin looked and gasped softly. She could see them clearly. Tall crystalline beings stood behind each Zolonian representative. Their bodies were made of what looked like living diamond, and they moved with graceful flowing motions. Light seemed to bend around them, creating rainbow patterns in the air. Behind the Morgoth delegation stood beings made of pure flame. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, with fires that burned in colors Sojin had never seen before. The flame beings watched the proceedings with interest, occasionally flickering brighter when their representatives spoke. Near the Peladori group floated entities that looked like they were made of liquid silver. They had no fixed shape but flowed and changed constantly, forming different patterns and symbols. Their presence made the air shimmer like heat waves. Each species had their own type of guardian, and Sojin could see them all clearly. They were magnificent beings that radiated power and ancient wisdom, yet the aliens themselves seemed completely unaware of their perception. Sojin cleared her throat and tried to keep her voice steady. "I can see them all, the crystalline beings behind the Zolonians, the flame entities with the Morgoths, the silver flowing beings near the Peladorians, many others. Each species seems to have different types of guardians watching over them." The reaction was immediate. Gasps, echoes, and sounds of amazement filled the chamber. Some aliens fell to their knees, others began chanting in their native languages. A few seemed to faint from the shock. High Priestess Zelamar stepped forward, her silver skin now glowing brightly. "Describe them, human. Tell us what our sacred protectors look like." Sojin took a deep breath and began to speak. She described the crystalline guardians in detail, their diamond-like bodies, the way light danced through them, the gentle expressions on their angular faces. She told the Zolonians how their guardians moved with flowing grace and seemed to radiate warmth and protection. She finished. The Zolonian delegation was weeping tears that looked like liquid starlight. High Priestess Zelamar's voice shook with emotion. "For 10,000 years we have prayed to them, left offerings, built temples in their honor, all without ever seeing their faces. You have given us a gift beyond measure, human." But Sojin was not finished. She turned to the Morgoth delegation and began describing their flame guardians. The beings were warriors, she could tell, with fierce expressions and bodies that burned with righteous fire. They carried weapons made of pure flame, and their eyes held the wisdom of countless battles. Captain Gorvik listened with growing amazement as Sojin described details that matched perfectly with ancient Morgoth religious texts. She spoke of the flame patterns that decorated their armor, the way they moved like living wildfire, the protective stance they took around their jester. Flame behind you, Captain Gorvik seems especially proud, Sojin added. She keeps nodding when you speak about your people's military victories, and I think she wants you to know that the recent battle strategy you used was exactly what she hoped you would choose. Captain Gorvik fell silent, his flame crown flickering. Wildly, other Morgoth warriors began making sounds of awe and reverence. They had received confirmation that their ancestors' spirits were indeed watching over themes. Jin continued around the room describing guardian after guardian. The Helix people had snake-like beings made of pure energy coiled around them. The Vortani were accompanied by storm clouds that crackled with gentle lightning. The Mud-dwellers had earth elementals that looked like walking mountains made of soil and stone. Each description sent shockwaves through the respective species. Religious beliefs that had been based on faith alone were suddenly confirmed by human eyes that could see what they could not. Every species learned that their most sacred stories were true. Their gods were real and had been watching over them all along. As Sojin spoke, she noticed something else. The Guardians themselves seemed pleased that humans could see them. They began moving more actively, gesturing toward their charges with obvious affection. Some even seemed to be trying to communicate directly with her. The session continued for hours, with Sojin describing over 40 different types of Guardians. Each revelation brought new waves of emotion from the aliens. Some species had to excuse themselves to process the information. Others immediately began planning new religious ceremonies to honor their newly visible protectors. By the end of the day, word was spreading throughout the entire alien fleet. Humans could see the Guardians, the invisible protectors that had guided galactic civilization for millennia, were visible to these strange beings from Earth. The implications were staggering. If humans could see the Guardians, they might be able to communicate with them directly. This possibility filled some aliens with hope and others with terror. The balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift in ways no one could have imagined. Sojin returned to her quarters exhausted but amazed. She had always believed that there was more to the universe than what people could see. Now she knew she was right. The galaxy was full of invisible wonders, and somehow humans had been given the gift to perceive them. Outside her window, the stars seemed brighter than before, as if the universe itself was celebrating this moment of revelation. Li Dongwu had never expected to find himself in the most sacred temple ship of the Galactic Council. The massive vessel was older than human civilization and served as a floating cathedral for dozens of alien religions. Golden corridors stretched in every direction, covered with artwork and symbols from countless worlds. The cultural anthropologists walked beside High Commander Vextali, the leader of the entire alien fleet. The commander was a Vortani with gray skin and 3 eyes that glowed with soft blue light. His species was known for their wisdom and had served as peacekeepers in the galaxy for thousands of years. Human Li Dongwu, the commander said in his deep, resonant voice, "We have brought you here because your people have shown abilities that challenge everything we thought we knew about the universe. Our greatest scholars and priests wish to observe you interact with the Guardians." Dongwu nodded as they entered the main temple chamber. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity. Statues and altars dedicated to different Guardian types filled the space. Representatives from over 60 species knelt or stood in prayer positions throughout the hall. What struck Dongwu immediately was how crowded the room actually was. While the aliens saw only empty space around their altars, he could see Guardians everywhere. Hundreds of spiritual beings moved through the chamber, each one different from the others. Some were tall and elegant, others were small and playful. A few looked ancient beyond measure, while others seemed young and energetic. As Dongwu walked through the temple, several Guardians approached him. They seemed curious about this human who could see them clearly. One Guardian that looked like a walking tree made of starlight gestured toward a group of kneeling Regelian priests. The Trigger Guardian spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves, though Dongwu somehow understood the meaning rather than hearing actual words. Tell them that the harvest ritual should be performed at dawn, not sunset. The timing has been wrong for 3 generations and it is affecting the crop yields on their home. Well, Dongwu looked around and saw that all the aliens were watching him expectantly. He walked over to the Regelian group and knelt beside their high priest, an elderly alien with purple skin and 4 arms. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Your guardian, the one that looks like a tree made of stars, wants you to know that the harvest ritual should be performed at dawn instead of sunset. He says the timing has been wrong for 3 generations and it's affecting your crops." The high priest stared at Dongwu with wide golden eyes. The other began whispering among themselves in their musical language. The high priest's voice shook when he spoke. "How do you know this, human? Our harvest yields have indeed been declining for generations. Our scholars have debated the proper timing for decades." Triguardian beside them swayed gently and spoke again to Dongwu. "Tell them also that the blue grain should be planted in spiral patterns, not straight rows. The earth spirits respond better to curved lines." The ancestors knew this, but the knowledge was lost during the Great War 2,000 years ago. Dongwu relayed this message as well. The Regelian priests began crying tears of joy. They had been searching for answers to their agricultural problems for centuries, and now their guardian was speaking to them directly through this human word. Spread quickly through the temple chamber, other species began approaching. Dongwu asking him to communicate with their guardians, the cultural anthropologist found himself moving from group to group, serving as a translator between the mortal and divine realms. Near the Zentarian altar, a guardian that looked like a living constellation of stars told Dongwu that their people had been misreading the sacred star maps for over a millennium. The patterns were meant to be read from right to left, not left to right. This revelation caused the Zentarian astronomers to recalculate thousands of years of religious and scientific observations. At the Morgoth fire altar, a flame guardian explained to Dongwu that their warriors had been using the wrong battle formations. The ancient war dances were not just ceremonies but actual tactical instructions that had been misunderstood over time. Captain Gorvik, who had followed them to the temple, listened in amazement as his people's military doctrine was corrected by their own patron spirit. The most surprising interaction came at the Pelidorus section, where several liquid silver guardians began showing Dongwu complex mathematical equations. By forming symbols with their flowing bodies, the equations were solutions to energy problems that had puzzled Pelidori scientists for generations. "Your people are trying too hard to harness quantum energy," one of the Silver Guardians explained. "That key is not to force it but to invite it. The energy wants to be used, but only by those who approach it with respect rather than demand." Dongwu spent hours moving through the temple, translating messages from guardians to their respective species. Each conversation revealed lost knowledge, corrected ancient mistakes, or provided guidance for current problems. The aliens watched in wonder as their gods spoke directly to them for the first time in their history. What amazed Dongwu was how personal many of the messages were. The guardians did not speak like distant divine beings, but like caring parents or wise teachers. They asked about specific individuals, worried about sick children, celebrated recent achievements, and offered comfort during difficult times. A crystalline guardian of the Zolonians asked Dongwu to tell High Priestess Zelima that her daughter, who had died in an accident, was safe and happy in the spirit realm. The guardian had been trying to send this message for years, but could never communicate it directly. The flame guardian behind Captain Gorvik revealed that the captain's father, who had died in battle, was proud of his son's leadership and wanted him to know that the family's sword would choose his youngest son as the next worthy bearer. These personal messages had the strongest impact on the aliens. Many broke down in tears, finally receiving closure or comfort they had sought for years. The temple filled with sounds of weeping, singing, and prayers of gratitude. As the day progressed, Dongwu noticed that the guardians themselves seemed happier than before. They had been trying to guide and comfort their charges for millennia, but had been limited to subtle signs and indirect influence. Now they could finally speak directly through human interpreters. The session lasted 12 hours, with Dongwu barely taking breaks. The aliens could not get enough of this direct communication with their spiritual protectors. Religious questions that had divided species for generations were answered definitively by the guardians themselves. By evening, the cultural anthropologist was exhausted but exhilarated. He had facilitated dozens of conversations between mortals and their gods, helping to heal ancient wounds and provide guidance for the future. The temple chamber buzzed with excitement as alien priests made plans to incorporate this new direct communication into their religious practices. High Commander Vextalai approached Dongwu as the session ended. The commander's 3 eyes glowed brighter than before, showing his deep emotion. "Humanly, Dongwu, you have given us something beyond price. You have become the bridge between our world and the divine realm. We can never repay this gift." Dongwu smiled tiredly as he looked around the temple chamber filled with aliens and their new visible guardians. The universe had just become a much more connected place. Captain Choi Minho stood on the observation deck of the alien flagship, staring out at the vast fleet that surrounded Earth. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Hundreds of ships from dozens of worlds hung in space like a metal constellation. Each vessel was unique, reflecting the culture and technology of its builders. 3 weeks had passed since the first revelations about human abilities. The galaxy was in chaos as species struggled to understand what it meant that humans could see and speak with their gods. Some aliens had declared humans to be sacred beings. Others feared that humanity might be a threat to the established order. The captain had been called to this meeting by the Council of Elders, the most ancient and powerful group in the Galactic Council. They were the representatives of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, some of which had existed for millions of years. Elder Morthok of the Eternal Builders was the first to speak. His species had constructed most of the great monuments scattered across the galaxy and were considered master architects of both physical and spiritual structures. The ancient being looked like a walking mountain made of living stone with eyes that glowed like stars. "Captain Choi Minho," he said in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, "we have summoned you here because the guardians have asked to speak with your people directly. They have revelations that will change everything we thought we knew about the universe." Captain felt a chill run down his spine. He had served in the military for 20 years and had faced many dangerous situations, but nothing had prepared him for conversations with beings that aliens considered gods. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in a spiral pattern that seemed to stretch toward infinity. The elders sat in their designated places, each one accompanied by guardians that were more ancient and powerful than any Choi had seen before. These were not just protectors, but the original beings who had guided the first civilizations in the galaxy. Elder Zephyr of the Starweavers gestured toward the center of the chamber. Her species had mastered time and space, traveled long before most worlds had developed writing. They looked like living nebulae with bodies made of swirling cosmic dust and starlight. The guardians wish to speak through you, human. They have been waiting for this moment for longer than you can imagine. Choi walked to the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of countless ancient eyes upon him. As he reached the designated spot, the guardian behind Elder Morthok approached him. This guardian was different from the others Choi had seen. It was massive, easily 15 feet tall, and seemed to be made of crystallized time itself. Its body shifted between past, present, and future forms, creating a dizzying visual effect. The guardian began to speak, and its voice filled Choi's mind, directly bypassing his ears entirely. The captain found himself speaking words that were not his own, serving as a conduit for this ancient being. "We are the first ones," the guardian said through Choi. "The beings you call guardians are our children, sent to guide the younger races as they developed across the galaxy. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years, always hoping that one day we could speak directly with those we protected." The elders leaned forward, hanging on every word. Several were making rapid notes, while others seemed to be praying or meditating. The magnitude of what was being revealed was staggering. Long ago, the guardian continued, we seeded a world at the edge of the galaxy with a special experiment. We took the best qualities of many species and combined them into a new form of life. These beings would be able to exist in both the physical and spiritual realms, serving as bridges between our world and theirs. Choi felt a growing sense of unease as he realized what the Guardian was describing. Earth, the humans. The Guardian was talking about humanity. That world was called Earth by its inhabitants, the Guardian revealed. Your species, human, is our greatest creation. You were designed to be the bridge builders, the ones who would eventually allow direct communication between mortals and the divine. The reaction from the Council of Elders was immediate. Some gasped in amazement, others fell silent in shock. A few began chanting in languages so old that even the translation devices could not interpret them. Elder Vashkol of the Memory Keepers stood up. His species had perfect recall and served as the living libraries of the galaxy. Their bodies were covered in symbols that shifted and changed as they stored new information. This explains the ancient prophecies, he said in wonder. Every major civilization has stories of the bridge builders, the ones who would come from the outer rim to unite the physical and spiritual realms. We thought they were myths, the Guardian behind Elder Morthok continued, speaking through Choi. Your ancestors knew us well, human. They built temples in our honor, spoke with us daily, and worked alongside us to shape their world. But as humanity developed technology, they began to forget the spiritual realm. They focused on the material world and lost their connection to us. Choi remembered stories his grandmother had told him about the old days when people could speak with spirits and see things that others could not. He had always thought they were just folk tales, but now he wondered if they were actually racial memories of humanity lost abilities. We did not abandon you, the Guardian explained. We waited. We knew that eventually humans would return to the stars and remember their true nature. The time has come for humanity to fulfill its destiny as the bridge between worlds. Elder Thelmora of the Prophecy Speakers rose from her seat. Her species could see possible futures and had guided galactic policy for centuries. They looked like living crystals that refracted light into rainbow patterns. As the prophecies spoke of great changes when the bridge builders returned, she said, some futures show harmony and growth, others show conflict and destruction. The choice belongs to humanity now, the Guardian addressed this concern directly through Choi. We do not seek to control or command. We offer partnership. The younger races need guidance, but they must choose their own paths. Humans will serve as translators and advisors, not rulers. Captain Choi felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Humanity had been thrust into a role they never asked for and never expected. They were no longer just another species trying to find their place in the galaxy. They were apparently the key to a new age of communication between mortals and their gods. But the Guardian had more revelations to share through the captain. The abilities you have discovered are just the beginning. As more humans interact with Guardians, your species will develop stronger connections to the spiritual realm. Some humans will be able to heal, others will see the future, a few will learn to travel between dimensions. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not just discovering they could see alien gods. They were apparently on the verge of developing abilities that would make them unlike any other species in the galaxy. The Guardian concluded its message with a warning and a promise. Great power brings great responsibility. Your species must choose wisely how to use these gifts. The galaxy watches and waits. Some will welcome human involvement, others will fear it. The path forward will not be easy, but we will guide you as we have guided others. As the Guardian finished speaking, Choi felt its presence withdraw from his mind. He staggered slightly, feeling drained but also enlightened. The Council of Elders sat in stunned silence, processing the enormity of what they had just learned. Elder Morthok was the first to speak again, his mountain-like form seeming smaller. Somehow the galaxy must be told, he said. Every species must understand what humanity represents. The old ways are ending and the new age is beginning. Captain Choi looked around the chamber at the ancient beings who had shaped galactic civilization for millions of years. They were looking to humanity for guidance. Now the roles had completely reversed. Outside the great windows, Earth hung in space, looking small and fragile, but Choi now knew that his home world was far more important than anyone had ever imagined. Humanity had been created to serve as a bridge between worlds, and the time had come to fulfill that destiny. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai floated in the zero-gravity chamber of the new space station that would change the galaxy forever. The human guardian embassy was unlike anything ever built before. It existed in both the physical and spiritual realms, allowing for direct communication between mortals and their divine protectors. 6 months had passed since the revelations about humanity's role as bridge builders. The galaxy had been transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Some species embraced the changes, while others struggled to adapt. Their entire understanding of religion, politics, and society had been turned upside down. The space station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built by dozens of species working together. It incorporated architectural styles from across the galaxy. Crystalline spires from the Zalonian spiraled upward, while Morgoth flame forges provided energy. Pelidori liquid metal flowed through the walls, creating a living nervous system that connected every part of the structure. I watched through the observation windows as ships arrived from every corner of the galaxy. Alien delegations came seeking audiences with their guardians. Pilgrims traveled vast distances just to witness direct divine communication. Religious leaders arrived to establish new doctrines based on confirmed divine guidance. The Doctor had been chosen to serve as the first director of human guardian relations, a position that made her one of the most powerful people in the galaxy. She had never wanted such responsibility, but the Guardians themselves had requested her specifically. They said she had the right combination of scientific curiosity and spiritual openness needed for the role. Today was particularly important. The Galactic Council was meeting to officially recognize the new cosmic order. Several species had initially resisted the changes, claiming that humans were disrupting ancient traditions. Some had even threatened war rather than accept human involvement in their religious affairs. The main conference hall was packed with representatives from over 300 species. The air hummed with tension as delegates argued in dozens of languages. The translation systems worked overtime, trying to keep up with the heated discussions. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform where Ji-hai would address the assembly. Behind her stood Kim Tae-ho, Park Sojin, Lee Dong-woo, and Captain Choi Min-ho. The 5 humans who had first revealed the existence of visible guardians were now the most famous people in the galaxy. High Chancellor Kex Primo of the Galactic Council called for order. The ancient Vortani leader had served in this role for over 2 centuries and had never faced a crisis like this one. His 3 glowing eyes swept across the assembly as he spoke. Fellow beings of the galaxy, we gathered today to address the fundamental changes that have reshaped our understanding of existence. The humans have revealed abilities that challenge our most basic assumptions about the divine realm. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some delegates nodded in agreement while others made sounds of disapproval. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kex Primo continued, we must decide whether to embrace these changes or resist them. The choice we make today will determine the future of galactic civilization. Ji-hai stepped forward to address the assembly. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, knowing that her words could either unite the galaxy or tear it apart. The weight of billions of lives rested on her shoulders. Fellow beings, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, we did not ask for these abilities. We did not seek to disrupt your ancient ways. We simply spoke the truth about what we could see. As she spoke, Ji-hai noticed the guardians throughout the hall. They stood behind their respective species, watching the proceedings with interest. Some looked hopeful, others seemed concerned. Several of the most ancient guardians appeared to be communicating with each other in ways that created ripples in the spiritual realm. The human continued her address. We understand your concerns. Some of you for fear that we seek to control your religious practices. Others worry that we will claim authority over your spiritual beliefs. Let me be clear. We want neither control nor authority. We offer only service. A delegate from the Helix Confederation rose to speak. The snake-like alien leader voice hissed with anger. How can we trust beings who claim to speak for our gods? How do we know you are not deceiving us for your own benefit? Ji-hai looked toward the Helix Guardian that coiled around their delegation. The energy serpent began to glow brighter and spoke directly to her in the spiritual language that humans could understand. Your guardian wishes to address your concerns, she said to the Helix delegate. He says that the sacred coils of protection around your home world were weakened during the recent solar storms. He has been trying to warn you for months but could not communicate directly until now. The Helix delegate stared at Ji-hai in shock. The solar storms she mentioned had indeed occurred, and their effects on the homeworld were classified information that no human should have known. The Guardian continued speaking through Ji-hai, telling the Helix delegation exactly how to repair the spiritual barriers that protected their world. The information was so specific and accurate that even the most skeptical delegates began to reconsider their oppositions. Similar demonstrations occurred throughout the assembly as guardians provided information that only divine beings could know. They warned of natural disasters, gave guidance on scientific problems, and offered comfort to species facing difficult times. The turning point came when Elder Jextalon of the Ancient Builders stood to speak. His species had built the first temples in the galaxy over 5 million years ago and commanded respect from every civilization. I have lived for 3 million years. He said in a voice like shifting stone, I have seen empires rise and fall, civilizations born and die. In all that time, I have prayed to the guardians and received only silence until now. The ancient being gestured toward Jihai and her colleagues. These humans have given us the greatest gift imaginable. They have restored communication between the mortal realm and the divine. For the first time in my long existence, I have heard my guardians speak directly to me. The elder, powerful words swayed many of the undecided delegates. If the ancient builders supported the humans, then their position must be the vote when it came was overwhelming. 312 species voted to accept the new cosmic order, with only 47 abstentions and 12 votes against. The galaxy had officially entered a new age. In the days that followed, the changes came rapidly. New temples were built that accommodated both human interpreters and alien worshippers. Scientific research accelerated as species gained access to divine knowledge. Political disputes were resolved through guardian mediation. Embassy became the most important location in the galaxy. Representatives from every species established permanent offices there. Trade routes were redirected to pass near the station. Entire fleets of pilgrims arrived daily seeking spiritual guidance. Jihai found herself at the center of it all, coordinating between hundreds of species and their guardians. The work was exhausting but deeply rewarding. She was helping to heal wounds that had festered for millennia and building bridges between worlds that had never communicated before. One evening, as she floated in her private quarters, looking out at the stars, Jihai reflected on how much had changed. In less than a year, humanity had gone from being unknown to being the most important species in the galaxy. They had not conquered through force or technology, but through their unique ability to see the invisible and speak with the divine. Guardians themselves seemed happier now that they could communicate directly with their charges. The spiritual realm buzzed with activity as divine beings worked openly with their mortal partners. For the first time in galactic history, outside her window, ships from across the galaxy moved in peaceful formation, carrying pilgrims, diplomats, and scholars to the embassy. The sight filled Jihai with hope. Despite the challenges and conflicts, the galaxy was becoming more connected than ever before. The age of hidden gods and silent prayers was over. The time of direct communication between mortals and immortals had begun, and humanity stood at the center of it all, serving as the bridge between worlds just as they had been designed to do. Millions of years ago, the future stretched ahead, full of possibilities both wonderful and terrifying. But for the first time in galactic history, mortals and their gods would face that future together.